Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, this is Tony Mold, the Learning and Development Coordinator for the AOE team. I'm very happy to welcome to our presentation today, and my guest is Lauren Mentz, the Director of Event Services at the American Concrete Institute and at AOE. During this presentation, you may ask questions using the chat box or question box. You can also use your computer audio or switch to phone call if you have any technical difficulties. Our panelists are going to address the questions during the Q&A session. And remember, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for review later. And now I'd like to say a few words about our presenter today, Lauren Mentz. As I mentioned before, she's the Director of Event Services for AOE and ACI. And Lauren holds a bachelor's degree in Hospitality and Tourism Management from Grand Valley State University, as well as the Certified Meeting Professional credential from the Events Industry Council. Her 15 years of industry expertise includes site selection, RFP development, contract negotiation, planning, building revenue at events through exhibits and sponsorships, as well as leading diverse teams. She has experience planning events in a wide range of sectors, from associations and corporations to professional sports organizations and charitable groups. So with this, welcome, Lauren.
All right, thank you, Tony, for the introduction. I'm excited to be here to share my tips for taking your face-to-face meeting virtual. I know a lot of us are facing webinar fatigue right now, but at the same time are still looking for education on certain topics. So that's what we're going to do with this quick mini webinar. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to cover 4 learning objectives. They are how to make the decision to postpone or cancel your event, define key technical considerations for attendees, how to engage speakers and sponsors in a virtual event, and lessons learned related to communication. So first, I'm going to start with sharing our organization's experience moving the American Concrete Institute Spring Convention from a face-to-face meeting to a virtual meeting. So our spring convention was scheduled to take place in March. Right around the same time, the cases of COVID-19 were spreading across the country. As our convention approached, it became really clear that our organization could not move forward with our face-to-face meeting. We knew pretty quickly that we had to move some components of our convention to the digital space. Now, our committee meetings are where a lot of the volunteer work for our organization gets done. And without moving forward with these meetings in some capacity, it would have really stalled the work of the Institute. So we made the decision to move the committee meeting portion of our event to the virtual space. At this point, we were just 17 days out from when our face-to-face meeting would have taken place. And given the volume of committee meetings, we chose to keep the same dates, times, and overall schedule from the face-to-face convention for our virtual meetings. Now, I have to say, it was a huge team effort across our entire organization to make this virtual event happen, and so quickly. We did use the GoToMeeting platform. We chose this platform because we were already using it in a similar capacity, but on a much, much smaller scale. And it integrated well with processes we already had in place. Now, of the 300 or so meetings that would have normally taken place, we did end up moving forward with 179 meetings. These were attended by nearly 1,500 unique users for a total of 344 hours of meeting time. That translates to nearly 430,000 person minutes. Now, we do consider this virtual event to be a success. We definitely learned many lessons and best practices along the way, and we'll be applying these to all our upcoming virtual events as well, many of which are the remaining components from our spring convention. So before we jump into how to move your in-person event to the virtual space, I want to share with you some key considerations for canceling or postponing an upcoming in-person event. So should you cancel or postpone your event? This is a huge decision for any group to make. You need to carefully consider the impact your decision will make on your organization, your attendees, and other stakeholders. there was a reason you chose to hold a face-to-face meeting in the first place, and you have to ask yourself, what is at stake if you cancel, and what makes the most sense for your organization and its goals. Now, part of your decision-making process should also include a careful review of all of your event contracts. It's really important to understand what contract terms you're legally committed to, and then what the financial implications would be should you cancel. Now, usually the closer you get to the event date, the higher the cancellation fees will rise. So if you choose to cancel your meeting, your organization should be prepared to pay cancellation fees. Now, even if you're thinking of postponing your event, you still need to be prepared to pay some, if not all, of the cancellation fees. That said, if you are considering a postponement, you do have a slight advantage in that there's an opportunity to negotiate with the venue or vendors. Some may be willing to reduce or in some cases waive cancellation fees if you rebook the same or a comparable piece of business within a certain time frame. You are, however, entirely at their mercy. There is no guarantee you won't pay cancellation fees, but if you are prepared to negotiate and make concessions, you may be able to reduce your financial exposure. So there is a slight advantage over cancellation if you choose to postpone. Now, I also want to touch on the force majeure or impossibility contract clause. I cannot stress enough how important this clause is to every single event contract, no matter the size or the scope. If you're unfamiliar with this clause, force majeure allows you to terminate your contract without penalty, and in many cases without any financial obligation for specific events beyond your reasonable control. So keep in mind, in most force majeure clauses, the qualifying event, be that a disaster, a strike, an act of God, or some other event, it must be out of your control and make holding your event impossible or illegal. Now, if you choose to invoke your force majeure clause, be prepared to provide evidence to support your claim. All right, now let's move on to moving your in-person event to a virtual format and see if it's the right fit for you. So for some organizers, the decision to move to a virtual format is an obvious one. It could be that their organizational goals are to hold more meetings virtually, or perhaps they want to expand their reach. But for others, the decision may not be so clear. So as the organizer, you need to determine what the value of your virtual meeting would be to both the organization and the participants. Some questions to think through would be, does this virtual event make sense for the organization? What will attendees get out of the virtual event? Is there interest? And if you're not sure, you can always survey your audience and ask for feedback. Now, if your virtual event aligns with your organizational goals and there is interest from participants, you also need to consider if this is something your organization is prepared to take on. Do you have the time, resources, and ability to move your event to a virtual space? If this is the first time you're making the switch, it's key to take the time to evaluate your resources and determine if it's something you can realistically take on. Now, you also don't have to move forward with every aspect of your original event. If it makes sense, spread out your activities or layer them over multiple days or even weeks. Some activities may not translate well online or be of interest to attendees in the virtual space. Again, select the components of your event that create value to your organization and attendees. Also, don't feel compelled to hold the virtual event during the same time as the original event. If you need more time, give yourself more time. Now let's talk through creating the virtual event. So in my opinion, the first step to taking your event to the digital space is to create a virtual event plan. Now this plan should be high level, realistic, and candid. And then once developed, will help you make decisions based on the focus needs of your event. So now by the time you reach this stage, you may have already thought through many of the things I'm going to cover, but I really encourage you to go through the practice of putting the plan on paper. During the planning process, it's so easy to get distracted or carried away with new ideas and directions that having a document you can refer back to will ensure your virtual event is still in alignment with your plan. So let's start with the first step, which is identifying the purpose of your event. Purpose drives everything. It's your mission. So ask yourself, why are you holding this event? Why would people want to participate? How will this event meet the goals of your organization? Are you trying to reach a larger audience? Are you looking to save money while delivering benefits to stakeholders? Do you need to accomplish work? Think through the purpose and reason behind your event and make sure the vision is clear. Next, let's focus on developing your event strategy, or the look, feel, and structure of your event. Start with understanding your audience and what kind of experience you want them to have. For example, do your attendees have short attention spans? Lengthy meeting times might not be the right choice if attention spans are short. Or are your attendees tech savvy? An intricate event platform could be a huge success if your audience can easily navigate them. So understanding the knowledge and behavior of your attendees will help you develop the right strategy and experience for them. You won't be able to give your attendees an identical experience to your face-to-face meeting, so think through how your meeting will translate virtually and then make adjustments. So now that you know what your meeting strategy looks like, it's time to focus on the logistics for making it happen. So evaluate the resources that are available to you. What kind of budget are you working with? Do you have the right kind of equipment? What about staff or volunteer help? Do you have the technical know-how to organize a virtual meeting all on your own? How are you going to market your event? It's time to be honest and realistic about your organization's capabilities and resources. So next I'm going to talk about execution. Putting together a virtual event can be a time-intensive project with many moving parts and technical components. You may find you have the talent, ability, and even technical know-how to handle the virtual event from within your organization. But if you don't, there are countless providers out there who are more than willing to take on all or part of your virtual project through its execution. Now, there are pros and cons for either. If you take it on yourself, there could be a cost savings, but then you're also limited to the technical capabilities of your staff. You could hire the service out. It comes at a higher cost, but the technical expertise is pretty much guaranteed. All right, so the last step in developing your virtual event plan is figuring out how you will engage your audience. Now, engagement takes effort regardless of the type of meeting you're planning. But anytime you go virtual, the challenge of engagement gets that much harder. At the end of your event, you want your attendees to feel like they've truly participated. So you could do something as simple as enabling and encouraging the use of a chat feature, or being proactive with a Q&A or open forum. It could be live polling. These ideas are all fairly traditional and readily available, but don't be afraid to be creative when you're addressing engagement. So now that you've put together your virtual event plan, you can start to flesh out additional details for your event. So let's talk through what some of these items might be. So you'll want to consider access. What type of access will you give to the event? Is it open to everyone, or are you limiting it to just your members or clients? Will you charge a registration fee, or will access be free? Think about content. What content will you be delivering, and how can you maximize the value? If you're offering an educational component, will you also offer CEUs? What about monetizing your event? Will you offer sponsorships, a digital trade show, or something similar? Will you recognize existing sponsors? Think through the digital opportunities available to you and how you can leverage those to build revenue. Now, another consideration is timing for the event. Is there a time zone that works best for all participants? Or are your attendees participating from all over the world? So carefully review your options to determine a time zone and a start time that works best for a majority of attendees or makes the most sense for your organization. Now, this is by no means a comprehensive list of items to consider, but it should be a good list to get you started. So now let's talk a little bit about technology for attendees. So it's really important to understand what your average attendee skill set is when it comes to technology. Are they really tech savvy, or do they have trouble navigating your basic event app? You need to choose a virtual event platform that closely aligns with the overall skill set of your attendees. Try to keep the process for joining and engaging in your event as simple as possible. Look at your website. Is the event visible and easy to access? How many clicks or downloads does it take to get to it? Keep these two as few as possible. If you overcomplicate the process, you'll confuse and even lose people. Now, of course, we always want our events to go perfect, right? But we all know they rarely do. Expect that you will have some attendees who will have trouble joining the event. It could be computer related, or in a lot of cases, user related. But event organizers need to be prepared and available to provide technical support to attendees if needed. Good customer service and tech support goes a long way in delivering a successful virtual event. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about all the different virtual event platforms out there, but just know one size does not fit all. Do your research and investigate the platforms out there. Depending on how complex your event is, something as simple as a live stream webinar, just like this one, may work for you. If your event is more complex with multiple components, you may want to look into a virtual conference format. There are even platforms that can digitally transform your face-to-face trade show into a virtual one, where you're still able to navigate the trade show floor and visit with exhibitors. So next, let's go over how to communicate that you're moving your in-person event to a virtual event. So attendees want to know what's going on. So be sure to communicate regularly and across multiple communication channels so that all your attendees are aware of the platform change. Keep in mind, you don't have to wait until you have all of your event details together before you share your plans with the world. Let your attendees know that the event isn't being completely canceled, and give them what details you can about moving the event virtual. You can always follow up later on once you have more information to share. I'd also recommend being transparent about virtual event expectations. Hiccups are a reality of live events. It's okay to share your expectations, especially if this is your first time doing a virtual event. I also want to mention that it's just as important to communicate your virtual event plans with your entire staff and team. You never know what questions they might get asked, and an informed staff person makes a great impression on your organization. All right, so a little earlier I touched on the importance of engaging your audience. The same consideration should also be made for your speakers and sponsors as well. Start by leveraging the commitment your speakers made to your face-to-face meeting and invite them to present during your virtual meeting. If you're able, offer CEUs for attendee participation. This provides another level of incentive for attendees, which in turn gives your speakers a larger audience. Consider recording your live presentations and turn them into on-demand sessions after the event. You could also have your attendees vote for an encore performance of their favorite session. This not only creates buzz, but it gives attendees a second chance at participation, and it gives the speakers additional recognition from their peers. Now, as for sponsors, look at what digital opportunities are available to you. Offer sponsors the opportunity to do a short commercial break during their presentation. The key here is to keep the commercial short to avoid attendees dropping off. When done right, this is a great way to recognize and highlight a sponsor. Another option for sponsors that also really works for exhibitors too is to offer a short 2-minute demonstration at the start of a meeting or presentation. This strategy is actually dual purpose. It not only recognizes and engages the sponsor, but it also gives the audience a few minutes to get settled before the start of a program. Now, if you're short on ideas for sponsor recognition, don't hesitate to reach out to your sponsors. have a brainstorming session. You never know what opportunities are out there you hadn't even thought about. So next, I thought I would share with you my top 3 lessons for moving your face-to-face meeting to a virtual format. The first lesson is make the process easy for attendees. No matter how tech savvy your attendees may or may not be, if you keep the process simple, it will be a much smoother process for everyone. The second lesson is provide resources and training in advance for your virtual event. So the fear of the unknown is real, and it can be a barrier for some people and even hinder their participation. So help your staff, volunteers, and participants get comfortable with your virtual event. You could offer training videos, reference materials, frequently asked questions, or even do a live session on it. This will help them prepare for what to expect when your virtual event goes live. And then the third lesson is offer live tech support. Inevitably, you will have attendees who will encounter problems joining the meeting, or they will have issues with their audio. Tech support can help troubleshoot these issues. It also provides an added comfort for attendees, and it keeps the rest of your virtual event running smoothly. So this concludes my talk. We're going to do a short Q&A, and while we wait for the questions from our audience, we have a couple of announcements. Tony?
Yes, thank you so much, Lauren. That was a wonderful presentation. And yes, as you mentioned, we like to make an announcement while we get questions from our audience. This is a great event we're going to have on May 27th. Where AOE and Cold Spring are going to present a case study. And we're going to have Ashley Kazire, AOE Senior Account Manager, and Carrie May, the Marketing Manager for Cold Spring, telling us the story of how they collaborated to do marketing in these uncertain times. And we're going to learn a lot about how to deliver key messages through video, social media, blogs, and more. And now we have a couple of questions here for you, Lauren. If you don't mind, I can start with the first question.
Perfect.
Yeah, can we provide examples of what would be and what would not be considered a qualifying event for using force majeure?
All right, that's a great question. So remember with force majeure that the qualifying event needs to be either illegal or impossible for you to conduct your event. So right now with, if we use COVID-19 as an example, if you have an event coming up in the next month or so, and the location of your event has, there's a stay-at-home order in place, or they're in a declared state of emergency, or maybe they've restricted the number of people who can gather. These would all be considered qualifying events for arguing force majeure. It literally becomes illegal and impossible for you to conduct your event. Now, if we wanted to flip this scenario around and say you have an event coming up, but there are no travel restrictions in place, events of all sizes are being allowed, but it's your attendees who are reluctant to travel. Maybe it's for health reasons or their company restricted travel, whatever it may be. These would not be considered cause for force majeure. It would be neither impossible or illegal to hold your event just because people don't want to go. It's a great question.
Sorry, Lauren, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering this question. We have another question here. Do you have any recommendations for doing a virtual networking event?
Yeah, there are a number of different options out there for networking virtually. In fact, ACI is in the process of putting together a networking event for next month. will actually be using Zoom as the platform and their breakout room features to assign attendees to small networking groups. But this is a very popular virtual networking strategy right now. A lot of organizations are out there using it, but outside of that, you could do like a chill out corner where people could just join in and chit chat during breaks. You could organize meetups by topic, so people with similar interests can join the conversation. If you have a lot of sessions with speakers, you could do a speakers lounge. You could run a scavenger hunt, either individually or you could assign teams. Really the great thing about networking events is you can be really creative and think outside the box with these.
Thank you so much. One of our participants is telling us that her company is looking to do a virtual event, but they don't have a specific platform in mind. Do you have any criteria they can use when choosing a platform?
Another great question. Yes, I'm actually going to tie this back to creating your virtual event plan. When you're thinking through all the stages of developing your plan, also keep in mind what characteristics you're looking for in an event platform. That essentially becomes the starting point for your criteria. So for example, how many attendees do you expect? This is something you would want to think through when developing your plan. If you're only expecting 100 people, then a service for 1,000 users may be more than what you need. So think about the features you need and is there a platform that can deliver? To throw out just some general criteria you'll want to look at, of course, the number of users, but also like licensing options. Is there integration with social media? What's the cost, the recording ability, what interactive features you're looking for, and of course, any technical requirements. And then if you're unsure of how a platform could integrate with your event, you can always set up a short demo or consultation with different providers.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a couple of additional questions, but unfortunately, we ran out of time. Our audience should know that we will send those questions to our presenter and she can address them individually. Also, please remember to fill out our brief feedback survey that you will see as we exit the webinar. At this point, we'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for joining us today. And goodbye, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.